Can you parse a little more into exactly what HB3 is allotting for pre-K? Because what I read in the media and what I'm hearing on the ground from educators are not completely squaring.
Yeah.
In terms of, is it truly a full day? Is it a half day at the beginning and then it becomes a full day? Can you shed a bit more light on that, please?
So, great question. I would say the first statement I would make is I think the districts themselves are still trying to figure it out. What we heard from the district folks this morning in our meeting was they have a board meeting this afternoon to talk about these very issues. So I don't have a good answer for you, but I will say, broadly speaking, it is an early education allotment with the requirement that if you do not currently fund full day pre-K for 4-year-old eligible kids, you have to.
But you're only reimbursed for half a day, is what I'm hearing.
So I want to.
Good, and that's it. Let's figure that out.
I can speak to that a little bit. So currently, districts are funded with ADA funding, which is like based on attendance. The new funding is not ADA funding. That means that it's not like for the pre-K student that comes into your school, you're given funding for a full day for that student. That's not how the formula was set up. You're given half day funding for that student. And then looking at the district, the allotment is based on the number of students that you have that are economically disadvantaged or English language learners. You receive, I think it's an additional 0.1 on each of those students. Yep. And that money has to be dedicated to pre-K through 3. So the assumption is that some districts will be using that money to fund their full day program because it's now a requirement.
And it is true. The allotment is a different deal than the average daily attendance, which is what we always refer to as the money follows the child. So if the child shows up, that money comes with them. And this allotment is different. So that is an important distinction.
And districts would have preferred that it was in the ADA funding. I think that may be some of the reason why you're getting that communication from districts. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Carol?
I know because I volunteer in the A-League district that only like 70, they're in the 70% of children who actually qualify come to pre-K. A lot of that is transportation, as you mentioned, working or having the ability to get a child there in the morning, picked up in the afternoon, and dropped off. Is funding for transportation included in this, or can they use that money to fund transportation, that this basket of money they're getting? Because I think that would make a difference.
Right, for sure. Yeah, particularly if the kids are having to go to a campus far away from home, which we have a lot of in Austin. There's a bump in the transportation allotment. I don't know how much that bump is. And so I would imagine if the district decides, there's a ton of local discretion here, y'all. Like, it's all about the implementation. And so my understanding is there's an increase in the transportation allotment. That's always a big issue for school finance. And that I would imagine that the districts have the discretion to use that.
And so
for little guys.
So that I'll say two things about thinking about transportation and distance, right? So another project that I'm working on that we're hoping to wrap up soon as it relates to Houston School District in particular is thinking about locations of programs and locations of students and where need exists. And so we're seeing that students who live closer to a program are more likely to enroll. And so distance matters and opportunity matters. And so the district is thinking about ways to increase opportunities for students, whether that means adding classrooms, adding seats, or actually adding programs, adding buildings in different locations to increase those opportunities. One of the things that happened last year is there was a school in HISD that put a ton of resources into pre-K. And one of the things that came along with that was the opportunity for students who lived within a certain distance to receive transportation. And very few families took advantage of it. So I think it would be hard for a district to make the decision to go all in on pre-K transportation for a few reasons. One, you're not sure that families are actually going to use it. And two, that to do pre-K transportation, it would probably be a completely separate system than your regular transportation because these students are so young. So it's not just about having a bus for 4-year-olds, but you're going to have extra staff on those buses and things like that. And so I think for that reason, it would be hard sell or hard decision for a district to just completely provide transportation for pre-K. But the alternative is let's open more programs where students live.
Do you have enough teachers that are qualified, or where are we on the teachers that are qualified for the pre-K? And are universities keeping up with creating programs?
Well, we're working with 2 universities that do early childhood education, and no, there's not anywhere near enough leaders being trained and people being trained in this. And what we've found with the universities and some of the other ones is they give up to date. They've given very little thought to educating around the stress the kids are under, and a lot of the teachers and the leadership that's being trained right now are not qualified to go into an inner city or into some of these distressed areas. So that's another thing we're trying to do with the 2 universities is get them to add stress and ACEs into their curriculum at a deeper level.
I will say too, there's that the TEA it was from the 2017 legislative session. They created a certification that's called EC through 3. So currently what exists for teachers is an EC through 6. That means you have programs that are trying to train teachers to teach grade levels from 3-year-old students to 6th grade students. And based on the presentations today, you can see that it's actually that those students have a whole host of different needs and developmentally are in very different places. And so there is a movement to try and narrow that so that teachers who are in training are getting more specific early childhood training. However, it's hard because districts want teachers with a lot of flexibility. They want to be able to move their teachers around. So there needs to be some work done around showing districts why it's really important to have highly trained early childhood teachers that have that child development lens. So I would say currently there's a lot of work to do around teacher training. There's a lot of work to do around recruiting teachers for early childhood. And there's some things happening across the country related to teacher pay and more specific training programs that I think could help with that.
I think one of the important things in Texas compared to even some other states is that even pre-K teachers are required to have at least a bachelor's degree, which is different than a lot of other places that people with child development associates might be able to be lead teachers in some other places, or maybe not even that level of certification can teach in pre-K classrooms. But at least Texas is making an effort to get more educated teachers who have a background in education in classrooms, but now we need to make sure that it's even more specific and more tailored than that.
And part of the problem too is because 3rd grade is the first time kids are tested on a STAR exam. Districts feel pressure to move their best teachers to the 3rd grade so that they can get ready for the test, or at least 2nd grade. So the lower grades tend to suffer. But I think there is we didn't even touch on the school finance bill that includes all the new funding for teacher pay, for compensation. And we're going to have to address compensation for teachers of young children, because we know it's even hard I'm sure for a college to recommend that students go into a teaching field if they're going to be making what a lot of these teachers make. So it's a compensation issue too, not exclusively.
Well, I'll just ask the panel one final question, which is you each come to this issue from different perspectives and different areas of expertise. But if you sort of had to look to the future around what you think is what's next for pre-K or early childhood education in Houston and in Texas, and you might think of what other regions are doing or other states are doing, what would you say is sort of what's next in terms of priority or focal points that we should all be aware of?
I think there's already huge momentum for really effective partnerships between childcare facilities and school districts in order to provide quality early childhood education. And the Texas Education Agency, with their she's not that new anymore, but early education director, who actually used to be the early education director in Austin ISD, she is working with the Commissioner of Education to really be innovative and smart about what those partnerships can look like, so that we're raising all boats. You know, the quality childcare centers are getting better. They're being able to provide the space. There's an interesting blended, funding streams between federal dollars and state dollars and local dollars. And I don't know how much of that's happening in Houston, but there are like some bright spots across the state where the partnerships are really effective. So I'm excited about that.
In our community and distressed communities, parents want the best for their kids, but you got to take in the just consideration of being in survival mode and just being reactive every day to so many things. So education gets dropped down to 12 or 13. Let's get rent paid, let's get some food in here. It's general survivability. So, that's why when you provide buses, they're not there because they're trying to survive. So it's something has to be done around there in better access. And then what you're already doing, the promoting it and having the enrollment week. We saw an amazing charter school come in across the street from, one of the not so ranked high elementary schools, and the charter school had to leave after a year or two because nobody would just walk across the street to go see it. And there's a lot of the adults, education didn't work for them, so they don't have a big belief it's going to work for their kids. So again, there's just a re-education and kind of a marketing campaign just around education can do it, it can work, and develop a belief that it will.
I think, I do have hope with this new influx of state dollars. And just, I think right now there is a greater awareness of, the importance of pre-K. I think that culturally is becoming more known. I have high hopes of, really high quality standards for our public programs at scale. I think also, speaking to the mixed delivery model, I think there's also, that's on the horizon for pre-K, that it's, the partnership between community providers and district programs is also a next step for Houston that a lot of regions nationally are beginning to pursue, that's increasing access to pre-K in its different forms.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I would say for us to keep thinking about is what universal pre-K might mean in a place. And while I think it's very important that we're providing resources to the most at-risk students right now, thinking about universal pre-K as a way to change the expectations and the understanding of the importance of pre-K and the norms about attending pre-K and what that means for families in a place is very important. Ellie and I were talking about it earlier that, kindergarten used to not be a norm for a lot of people, and that's something that had to change. And so I would suggest that maybe by thinking about what universal pre-K would mean, so that means offering pre-K, free pre-K to all students, what that would mean to change the culture about pre-K going for families. And that's something that we should keep thinking about moving forward.